And then slowly over time, they will erode away our agency, our autonomy, our ability to know what we should know. And this is like that area where I'm going to maintain control through gaslighting, through manipulation, through intimidation and isolation, maybe financial abuse. I've got the control now. You think I'm wonderful. And then I'm going to do these things to maintain it. And I'll give you a few breadcrumbs here and there to hold on to keep you engaged in the relationship. And then if you decide to leave, I'm going to actually exert more power and control. The escape is when victims are most at risk. You leave a job and an employer will tell other people you were a horrible worker when you were their most stellar employee. The same thing happens, of course, when we see this happening in larger systems like governments. What do? We pathologize people, women in particular, people of color, anybody who's vulnerable, and make them out to be crazy or wrong because they're speaking out about an abuse they suffered, right? And so these people in general get worse when the mask falls off, right? When they're exposed for who they are, the coercive control intensifies. A lot of people, we know that now to be post-separation abuse. It's all coercive control. So, in a nutshell, coercive control could be physically violent, sexual violence, but like any kind of abuse, it doesn't usually start off that way. All abuse starts with the psychological tactics, gaslighting, manipulation, intimidation, and isolation, financial abuse, legal abuse, and then sadly, weaponization of the children, which is, of course, my particular niche. So there we go.
That's an amazing explanation because again, it's this is how it happens. It's not like how could they take it? No. Life with them for it could be 10 years. That is just wonderful. That bond, that thing. And then something happens and that flip turns from black and white to now we've got to try different techniques because maybe the person isn't cooperating enough, or maybe they see through them, or they respond and try to set a boundary. That's when the gas pedal goes down on next tactic. Let's go for it. We see them slipping away. What can we do? Let's use the kids. Let's do this. Let's do that. But in this situation that we're talking about with adult children falling for this control, what do you see as their vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so this is a good one. First of all, I love your gas pedal analogy. That's perfect. We're just gonna put a little gas on there. Woohoo! Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I think when I think about, I have a podcast called Perfect Prey because I think abusers choose certain people.
Mhm.
And what is it about these people that make them more vulnerable to be victims of abuse? Sadly, in the clinical world, we've often called it codependency. I don't believe that's true in most of these cases. I'm not suggesting that someone doesn't become codependent in an abusive relationship because that's what the abuser wants.
Mhm.
But I don't think not everyone goes into it codependent or with low self-esteem.
Mhm.
What we know is that the traits of victims and survivors, they tend to be highly empathic, loyal to a fault, givers in relationships. They give, they may overgive. They're highly optimistic. The glass is half full. And then sometimes they might have an abusive parent, which will make them kind of fall more into that role. But for me, what I see more and more is just people in general who are decent human beings are preyed upon. And if I'm an abuser, I'm not going to choose someone who's not a giver. The relationship's not going to work for me. I'm going to have that girlfriend or boyfriend for 3 months and then say, this isn't working because this person doesn't give me enough, doesn't take care of me enough, isn't quite as loyal as I'd like them to be. They're pushing boundaries, this person. And
Mhm.
so the people who end up in these relationships, even though they may be smart, and I mean, well, look at Tracy, come on. We're in a room right now with smart women, right?
Right.
And it happened. And as you know, and if your listeners don't know, I started this work at the age of 19. I was educating on this topic my entire life. Fell in love at 16 and then stayed married to someone for 27 years and 11 months. I teach on the domestic abuse wheel every single semester in my college social work classes. I'm a therapist. Didn't know what was happening to me. That's how insidious it can be. And so, would the relationship have lasted as long if I wasn't trying over and over again to make it work, to
Mhm.
fix it, to keep on going at it. And that means sometimes, to the point of your question, that I might have to let go of other things in my life that matter.
Mhm.
And that I'm willing to do that for this person. I'm willing to do that for this person. Yeah.
And again, it's all about control. Nobody goes into this relationship, and I'm talking about the younger 30ish, people that are doing this, going, I think I'll pick someone that won't like my parents, right? But it ends up being that way. And I think the vulnerabilities I see are they want to be happy. They want to be loved. And so that mirroring that the narcissist does is, oh my God, you're our family. When I look back at my two marriages, I came from such a horrible narcissistic home. I wanted their family. I was like, family, right? So sometimes they're seeking things they didn't have. And sometimes they have a solid family, but think we could welcome this person in because they didn't have one. So there's that pity or help them, save them kind of, let me help. I see a lot of, narcissists tend to pretend they're the victim. And so if you are that rescuer and you sit there and they target you because of that kind, forgiving, loving, all the traits that we just described, then that's how it ends up happening, is because you just wanted to be loved, right? And this person sold you not just love, but the best love you could have ever imagined, the love bombing, the temptation, the promises, the hope.
Mhm.
And then slowly it just starts to turn away, right? Um, the
Yeah.
the way that they divide families,
Mm.
the tactics that they use are so common to narcissistic abuse, where it's the false allegations, and it starts off that the narcissistic son or daughter-in-law loves the family, they're welcomed in. And then they start to pick. Your mother looked at me funny. Did you see how she said that? Did you see how she lifted our child up? We don't lift them up that way. That pick, the devalue is pick, find fault with them. Can
Mhm.
you talk about other ways that the tactics they might use that builds this estrangement?
Sure. So I think, first of all, right, that people who the victim loves become a threat.
Mhm,
They just become a threat. And that could be their mother, their sister, their brother, their best friend. It doesn't matter.
mhm,
Everyone is now a threat to the narcissist, the coercive controller, narcissistic abuser's ego,
mhm,
right? And so there's that. And I think that also everything becomes a competition,
mhm,
And so, and then there's this, well, then I know how I'll get in there. I feel like this is what these abusers do, is then they start just judging.
mhm,
They start judging in a way that feels kind of helpful, like, oh, your mom, that was interesting the way that she treated you that day, and they start judging. And then the seeds of doubt start to get placed in this person who just wants to love and have a healthy, like they want a healthy, these people don't sign up for an unhealthy relationship, right? No. So they just want the relationship to work. And they're like, oh, and this is a different perspective. They probably haven't heard from someone else. That's the other thing, is all of a sudden there's someone giving them some different perspective. And in some ways that can feel autonomous. That can feel like, oh, I've never thought of it that way before. The reason why they've never thought of it that way before is because it probably wasn't a problem. And
exactly.
so the amount of black and white thinking that I feel starts off slow, and then eventually becomes very, how shall I say, thick. It's a
Mhm,
lot of black and white thinking that occurs. And so all of a sudden, maybe mom was a little irritating, or she's a nag, or why'd she call again? Or did she tell you how to change the diaper? Those little things now become, she's intrusive.
mhm. She's
She's trying to
controlling.
control you. When actually, who's the controller, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's how I see it. I actually, I think I mentioned to you that I have an article I hope is going to come out, but I talk about it as the three I's. So for me, I see it that isolation and intimidation are kind of together. They're helping each other. I'm going to isolate you. I'm gonna, say to you, do you really want to go out with your friends? See, that's isolating, but that's also a little intimidating,
Mhm.
right? So it's gonna be very, again, nuanced. It's
Mhm.
gonna be extremely covert, but what I'm trying to do is control you. And so that isolation and intimidation has to occur in order for me to lure you into the indoctrination.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
so it's the three I's. I'll isolate you, I'll intimidate you. And in that might be threats of, you really want to go see your mother? I'm going to miss you so much. That's again an isolation tactic and a threat, an like an underneath threat, right? An insidious threat. And then in that, I eventually get you to eat, and it's a process. It's acquiescing slowly to me, and then eventually aligning with me. Now,
Mhm.
does the full indoctrination occur with everyone? I don't believe it does. I believe there's always this little part of this person who will always be attached to their loving, protective parent or brother or whoever that person's trying to do. I believe it's always there.
Mhm.
But the problem is that as adults, people have more autonomy. So
Mhm.
it's harder to engage with people who have, they don't live with you anymore. They're living out in the world. And
Mhm.
so reigniting that attachment is more challenging. It's just more challenging, especially when you have a blocker, you have that person who sees you as that threat. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, it's a perceived threat. They build
Mm,
in your child. As you were talking, I was writing things down, going, "Oh, that was good." The seeds of doubt is something that I hear every day, right? It's the false allegations, just like, "Oh, did you see that? Your mother's controlling," like you just said. Or did you see that? I think she's passive aggressive. Has she always, done this, because that is abuse. And I recently had a conversation with a colleague, and we have a video coming out that we talked about in a very open discussion that while us as people who help people in situations like this, if someone is with a truly abusive parent, I am talking screaming, plate throwing, cuckoo crazy, get away, protect yourself, no contact is the best solution, things like that. And I feel like this younger generation is using all of that and twisting things that aren't abuse and going, see, no contact. Here, watch this video on no contact, when they're made up and manufactured the abuse scenario.
yeah. So this is exactly it, right? So they're actually being coercively controlled by someone else, not by the parent,
Mhm.
but the projection is being put onto the parent or the other loved one.
Mhm.
And when you take someone who again is really wants to work at a relationship, wants to have it, maybe has children with this person,
Mhm.
they're going to make some choices. And I think you're right. There's a whole estrangement movement that is sadly, I believe, sometimes missing the education about why someone might be estranged, legitimately so,
Mhm.
and why someone wouldn't. This kind of relates to when I talk to parents about their children, like some children are forced into repair therapy with someone they believe is an abuser, right? How
Mhm.
horrifying that is, right? And so, you make a child sit in there and try to repair with someone they believe is an abuser
Mhm.
and really harmful. But then we have this whole world of people who are claiming someone's an abuser when they're not an abuser. It's a scary, slippery slope.
It really is, and it just feels like it's amplifying. And okay, from a small percentage of my clients to 40% of my clients are estranged parents because they don't have any, a lot of resources for narcissistic. Yes, there's a million on estrangement, but when it's a narcissist, the coercive control tactics amp up. Like in any estrangement, I think you have them, but narcissists in a daughter or son-in-law, they're using every trick in the book, projection and just building this.
Triangulation, splitting, absolutely. I would say too, for me, this is just my opinion, that anybody who's participating in that
Uh-huh.
is a narcissistic abuser.
Mhm.
Like I don't think it's appropriate to look at the world through a black and white lens. That's what abusers do. The one time I think it's appropriate to do is that if somebody has tried to destroy your relationship with a loved one for no good reason, then they are a coercive controller, narcissistic abuser, period. They are like a 10 on the scale for me.
I
Yep.
have a rubber stamp.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we tiptoe around it sometimes. We'll say, oh, well, he's just mad at his mother and, he's not talking to her and, and his girlfriend's just, but they're living a good life and they're happy. And if there was no abuse ever,
Mhm.
I mean, everybody can have differences, then I'm immediately looking at that partner and saying, that partner's a narcissistic abuser. They're controlling him. I just feel like that's the answer. And here's the problem. We're not calling it out enough.
Mhm. Right.
How
Yeah.
many people are living among us like that are problematic?
Too many. And even if I read all the estrangement books, which are right next to me versus the big shelf back there, they touch on daughters and son-in-laws because there are other reasons people can be estranged from their child, but they just touch on it. And to me, it's like, oh my God, that's look at the other person. They're the one, and watch how your child has changed. And watch how not only your relationship with your child, but their friends, their
Yes.
friendships, they stop doing what they love to do. It's not just you. That's what I want parents to know. These are other flags that go, okay, they're taking everything from them, not just us, right?
Isolation, right?
Right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can't control
Yeah.
them without that. So, what do parents do? Because you and I have had these conversations, I have parents that write letters to them 3 times a week, which is not necessarily what I would advise, but that's what they want to do, and they push them farther away. So, what can a parent do? Because their hearts are breaking, and often the grandchildren are used as hostages.
Yeah.
And, the parents are like, you know what? I just want my grandchildren. You can still be a jerk. I want my grandchildren. They need me. What do they think? Did I disappear? I'm worried about my grandchildren. So, what does a parent do in this situation, honey?
Well, yeah, no, there's a couple things that you're talking about too that are very interesting, and they've come up for me recently too, where I've had grandparents saying, my child's not allowing me access to my grandchildren. And then so one grandma was saying that her daughter is with the abuser.
Mhm.
And they keep having falling outs, right? And I'm like, that's exactly what the abuser wants. The
Mhm.
abuser wants you to have a falling out. And so I would say in that direction, have a relationship that is totally unconditional, which of course we all know, right? Good parents have unconditional, but even if you have to walk into a home and there's an abuser there,
Mhm.
what your child needs more than anything is to know that you are there, whether they're with that person or not. Because if they think you're only there if they're not with that person, they're not going to be as likely to leave.
Mhm.
It's really challenging though, right? I mean, this particular grandma, her daughter's being physically abused, and she has to go to the house. And in order to see her grandchildren, she has to follow their rules. And I said, but you have to understand that those moments you're there with that grandchild are gifts.
Mhm.
They are amazing gifts. It is so worth it. So
Mhm.
there's that, right?
Mhm.
I think the other thing is, I have a mom right now. She didn't see her children for 6 years. And her son at 16 got in the car, went to a reunification camp. You know that story, these horrible camps. Got in a car, drove to his mother 6 hours away, angry as all hell. Because who's he angry with, right? He's angry with her, even though the abuser did all of this, right? And she's like, what do I do? Like, how do I? I'm like, you be benign as possible. Like
Mhm.
as benign as possible. Not where were you? I haven't seen you, or don't have that attitude with me, or whatever. You welcome them as unconditionally as possible. And so, for these people, you can send a message, but it can't be a long message of love. It can't be a long message of I miss you. It has to be, hey, went to the fair last week and I saw these cute little elephants that I know we used to collect when you were a kid. And then a picture. And it has to be without an expectation that they reply.
Mhm.
If they think that you're trying to control them, that you're requiring something back, you see, you appear weak, you
Mhm.
appear vulnerable. They can't come to us if we're weak and vulnerable. They
No,
can't.
no.
They can't come to us if they think we're broken. If they think we're broken by their behavior or by their partner's behavior, they will not come to us. They have to believe that we are living our life, that we are strong, that we miss them, that we can't wait for them to come home, but we're not like sitting at the door, like, right? And when they come, they can't think it's like this. We have to just be like, hey, so glad you're here,
Mm-hmm.
right? A
Hmm.
nine.
Yeah. And I think as you were talking about the thing that came up in my mind that I see a lot of parents struggling with is, the false allegations are over the top. And they range from A to Z, and they are just, in many cases, unbelievable, right? And the parents want to justify, they want to explain the truth. I'm not sure that really helps. I know it doesn't, but can you talk to that so that people who are watching this can see that, well, it's not me just telling them that rehashing this stuff and let me explain only goes to the fact that you're not listening to them, even if you're taking accountability, which is part of this, right? But at the same time, you're just rehashing, and throwing it back at them. That's not the way to get them back, is it?
No, and there's actually a psychological experience that they have. So I kind of imagine that the narcissist is creating a fire in their victim, like in their belly, right? They got a little kindling going in there. And that kindling is becoming judgmental, seeing things in a black and white lens, not accepting of other people's differences, right? They actually are trying to create themselves in this person. It's much easier to do with children. We don't expect it to happen as much with adolescents, but we see it in cults all the time,
Mhm.
right? Where people take on the cult leaders, ideas, right? Their ideology, right? So that kindling is going. And here's what they hope. The abuser hopes that you actually call that out. Because you see, if you call that out, what is the victim needing to do in that moment? If you call it out, if you try to justify your behavior, you
Mhm.
try to argue, you defend yourself, you explain, Jade, Jade, right? If you do that, what are you doing that actually the abuser is super excited about, by the way? You are, you are like adding kindling to that fire.
Mhm. Yeah.
You are actually, if that child has to respond to you, and in that they feel shame because they know that either you're vulnerable, that they've hurt you, that you're sad about this, all of those things, that creates more shame, and that literally is gasoline on the kindling, right? And so when we go in to explain, we are helping the abusers their narrative. We're supporting it,
Mhm.
and we can't.
Yeah. So how should
Yeah.
you handle a situation like that? Where they want to, obviously it's not, but again, you're telling us, I saw a pretty rainbow, I did this, I did that, but that empty part of them that wants validation, I didn't want to have sex with your husband, as an example, right? That's the kind of crazy stuff that parents are like, let me explain. That never happened, right? And that's certainly in that situation, it's over the top. But there's so many other false things that happen that that need for justification. I just want to help people squelch it by understanding how dangerous it is in the relationship, because as you just said, it's going to trigger this, it's going to empower the narcissist, and it's going to make it worse because anything that empowers them takes away your power.
Absolutely. And the person who's the victim needs to see you in a position of personal power. That's going to draw them towards you, not away from you. The
Mhm,
moment you give over your power, you're going to sever the relationship more. And you
mhm,
give over your power when you're verbose, when
mhm,
you're too much explaining. You give over your power, and that's problematic. But your child accuses you of taking their trust fund or taking their college money and using it for something they shouldn't have, right? Your response, I have an acronym that I use with all my protective parents that I work with. It's called VEST 2.1K. Stick with me. Validate with empathy and a soft tone. I'm sorry that's what you think happened.
mhm,
I'm sorry that you heard that. I'm sorry that was told to you. I would prefer to refrain from you and put it at the end of the sentence. And sometimes saying I'm sorry triggers these people. You have to gauge that. Saying I'm sorry may not work, right? You can say something like, that's not true, honey.
mhm,
That's actually not true. Now, why the vest two? Because you only say it twice. Because if you decide to engage and say it more when they come back at you and more and more and more, you are kindling the fire. So you say it twice.
mhm,
And then the point one, K, is you disengage with kindness. They come at you the third time. They are trying to get you into the narcissist vortex. They're trying to pull you in. And so you disengage with kindness. Now, you can't disengage angrily. You can't run off. You have to be prepared. I always say the best thing to do is to come up with the list of things you're going to be accused of when you get on the phone or when you see them.
mhm,
They're going to accuse you of taking all of their college money. They're going to accuse you of cheating on their dad. They're going to accuse you of, I don't know, doing drugs, whatever. You know better than anyone what you're going to get accused of because they're going to use your vulnerabilities. They're going to take something that really matters to you or that a challenging life circumstance, or maybe your mother had this challenging life circumstance. They're going to use it. Come up with the list and now come back up with your VEST 2.1K responses. Come
mhm.
up with it. What's your VEST 2 responses and how are you going to point 1K disengage with kindness? How are you going to do that?
I love that.
And and if you don't practice it
Mhm,
with an empty chair, with a girlfriend, this is like clinical, this is what we do in therapy. We have people talk to an empty chair. We have them come up with their statements. Like, what are your statements? Come up with those statements. And when you come up with those statements, you need to practice them over and over again because your brain, when your child triggers you, is going to go right to reptilian part. They're in reptilian part. You're going to go to reptilian part of the brain. It's going to, you got to go above. You got to come in over here.
mhm,
Personal power. That's not true, honey. I'm sorry that you heard that, but that is not true. Twice. They say it a third time. Yes, you did. You stole all the family money. You did this to us. You ruined the family. You cheated on dad. You know what? I'm done talking about it. I'm going to go out for a walk. Look at you running away. Oh, look at you. You know, you're running away as you always do. Actually, going for a walk. You want to join me? And then just keep going.
mhm,
Soft tone, co-regulating with the person,
mhm,
bringing yourself down. The only way you can do that when they're triggering you is if you've practiced. And by the way, the really good news is we know the brain heals when we do that. Now your brain's going to be more regulated.
mhm. Wow, I wrote down the vest thing. I'm so excited about this. It's exactly what I tell parents is to really make that list of things that they've accused you of. Think about it because, you know, understanding the offenses, and that list could be like Santa's list and keep growing and growing every time you see them. There'll be another thing added to it, but planning for it, planning what your response will be when you get that accusation for the 40th time, knowing what you are going to say or think about helps you not say the wrong thing. Because
Mhm.
if it happens, when we are emotionally triggered and hurt, it can come out as anger. So if we don't have it in our head that I'm going to stay cool, calm, collected, I've got an answer for this, let me pull it out of my pocket, you'll have more confidence. There'll be less fear because it's the unknown of walking into a situation and getting lambasted, and you're just like, oh, and then you go right to that elevated emotion and you can't answer correctly. By having it in the can in your brain, it's so much easier to not make another mistake and react with emotions because that's playing their game. They're winning if you are emotional.
Absolutely. And then you have more held against you, and then you're more devastated and heartbroken.
Mhm.
And so, what is there about this idea of having this position of personal power, knowing they're going to accuse you of X, Y, and Z? You're ready with your response and you leave. You're still sad that they would accuse you, but you haven't lost your personal power. When we lose our personal power, we feel so much more exposed. We now we have more to apologize for. Right now, we actually do have something to be sorry about, right? When we retain it, we actually can watch the room shift. And I see this all the time with children where they're coming home dysregulated, they're misbehaving, they're calling their mother a horrible name. And I say we're actresses on stage. Like pretend you're in a theater and you're on stage
Mhm.
and your kid's walking in and they're going to accuse you of these horrible things, but
Mhm.
you're an actress. What's your response going to be? It's
Mhm.
totally different when you think you're acting a part. And
Yeah.
by the way, again, that's when the brain heals. But
Mhm.
if you aren't acting the part, you're going to succumb
Mhm.
and then your brain is going to be in a much more traumatic place.
Yeah.
We have so much more control than we think we do. It's very challenging. But again, with practice, role play it. Ask your girlfriends to sit around the table and say, okay, give it to me really bad. I'm going to see my kid next week and they're going to say this, and this to me. Give it to me. Fight me. Like, let me work with this.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's intentional work.
And it does, again, anything that parents can do to build up their arsenal of tactics that calm their nervous system, that don't let them get triggered so easily. Because again, the narcissist knows exactly what buttons to push because it's
Mhm.
worked 20 times already. The more you allow them to push the button, the more it's like a monkey. They just go beep, and they're just going to keep on pushing the button. And so to change your reaction, whether it works with them or not, you walk home with some dignity. You walk home going, I know what I did. I didn't make it worse. I'm gonna go walk it off now because now I'm even maybe more upset, right? But holding it together is key in this situation. And so often they trigger you to piss you off to get you to react, right? And it's the game. So having parents sort of understand that that's what they're trying to do. Um,
And
you want to go,
yeah,
I didn't do that. You want to stand on the top of the mountain and go, I didn't do what you just accused me of. Or if you did, and you happen to have given your grandchild a blueberry, and you didn't know they didn't like blueberries or whatever you're being accused of, take accountability instead of, well, I didn't know strawberries or blueberries were bad. And instead of going that direction, since when are blueberries bad, right? Just go, I'm so sorry. Next time I'll ask. And start to fall in to keep the peace is going to help the parents a lot more.
absolutely. And it begs the question, doesn't it? Why do we have to prove to anyone else what our intentions were?
Mhm.
So that's a self-worth issue, isn't it? That's a, I'm worried they don't think enough of me. I'm worried they don't love me. I'm worried that I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
And so now that's about how do you heal yourself
Mhm.
with this feeling of inadequacy because you have a child who's indoctrinated perhaps against you.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think there's like addressing why that matters, right? And I know because it's the pain of not having your child see you for who you are. Holy crap, right? That's a big deal. But addressing that within yourself, that you are good enough, that you didn't do these things, that there's a world of people out here suffering like you are. You're not alone.
Mhm.
And that this is about the character traits of an abusive person.
Mhm.
that this is their goal. This is all they do all day long is think about how to compromise others in their lives.
Mhm.
You have been a casualty of that, but and this is important, your child, I don't care if they're 30, 50, 20, or 10, or 5, they are a prisoner of war. They
Mhm.
are a hostage.
Mhm.
They don't have a choice. They don't believe they have a choice. They
Mhm.
don't believe that they don't think they can disengage from that harmful relationship. They don't see that relationship as harmful. And
Mhm.
so if we can frame the way we see these people who are suffering, including ourselves, but this adult victim is suffering, then the anger actually comes down.
Mhm.
The grief. So anger is certainly an aspect of grief, but rather than it be the anger in the grieving process, it becomes the sadness in the grieving process.
Mhm.
And the sadness is not a cover up. Grief, anger is a cover up to how we really feel.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sadness is not.
Mhm.
Sadness is an opening of a little crack of a window, I say, like we're opening it a little bit,
Mhm.
and we can take in that sadness and grieve it and recognize that our child is a victim or our brother is a victim
Mhm.
and see them in that light versus as someone who's trying to hurt us because it's super painful.
That is such an important message. I want to add on to that just a little tiny bit. The parents have to realize that they are a victim too. Right? This is affecting their entire family, the siblings, the grandparents, the whole nut, right? This is what happens in every narcissistic relationship. There's casualties, and your child is a casualty, but the family is also, because siblings are divided and everything, even parents, they don't agree on how to handle the situation, and it's dividing them. It's like if they were Velcro, slowly opening up the relationship that the parents have been married for 40 years over how they're going to handle it. And it's a big nut, and there's so much pain involved that people need to get some help when this is happening and really understand that. I think just to know that you are not alone is so important. I started an estrangement group last Friday, and within 10 minutes, one of the mothers said, I've been reading like 400 books, and in the first 10 minutes, I've gotten more validations than I did in all of those books because I heard the other parents go, oh, I'm not alone. You can't talk to them unless they're driving home alone in the car. Oh my God, me too. Then you're not the only one battling this. And it doesn't, there's no comfort in group pain, but there's validation that it's not you. Right?
Right.
Dr. Ramadi's book. It's not you that's the bad parent. It's the coercive control that is tilting your child's brain and just twisting those things that were harmless or potentially they were a mistake, but they shouldn't be epic that you lose your child over it. That's the coercion that's sitting there building that story and making you into the enemy because they need to control.
Absolutely. No, so true. So true. The child's a victim. And I think the reason why I highlight that is because I think what happens is people get really angry
Your
and they
child.
say, I can't believe it. Why won't they leave? Or can't they see it? And they get angry. And then, you know, we have to understand that the child feels that shame. They know we're disappointed in them,
Mhm.
right? But yes, the adult parent or sister or brother, whoever it is in the family system, is certainly a victim of this too. The good news is they're not in prison, frankly. They're outside of it and they're watching it, right? It's almost like watching someone get tortured, someone you love so much, and you're watching it happen, and it is torture.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's torture that isn't always terrible. In my marriage, while I can look back, as you said too, we can look back, but it wasn't all torture, right? So I don't want parents to go, "Oh, that puts more fear in their heart. Oh my God, they're in torture." No, there's good times and bad times. It's the manipulation is so stealth in many cases that they don't see it coming.
right, right. No, for sure. The intermittent reinforcement, the breadcrumbs, whatever you want to call it. I think, what we know about these abusers is that those get further and further away from, like, right in the beginning, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
But then the victim requires less.
Mhm.
And so because the victim is losing their autonomy, that autonomy, that agency is getting stripped away. So some people say, well, why is she staying with him when he's like, he never does anything? He doesn't even have a job. She's doing all the work. Well, because he has gotten her to the point where the intermittent reinforcement can just be dropped in occasionally and she's fine. And she's drawn back to it. The oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, and other hormones are to blame for this neurological reaction that creates a trauma bond. And so, yeah, I use the word torture. Um, I think probably just because
It is.
it's so it's so horrible, but to your point, there are good moments.
Mhm.
And and some of our children don't seem like they're in danger. Like they're with decent human beings, it appears, right? And the world thinks they're in a healthy relationship. Yet you're the only one who's saying, "Whoa, what's going on? Something's happened here," right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have
Yeah.
something that every time you open your mouth, I got another word, and I know we're going to get going in a second here. But what you just said about we went into everyone being a victim. We have to remember that that's one of the coercive control tactics that the narcissist is using when they're smearing against you. Your mother doesn't like me. They did this. They become the victim, and your child is forced into a role to protect them from the evil you and their family, right? So it's a whole ball of stuff. When your child is being controlled, they're like, but your mother was so mean to me, or whatever it is. And then your child is like, oh, mom, how could you do that? They're responding to the narcissist's actions, and then their game of playing victim.
Yeah, for sure. That victimization role is pretty strong.
Mhm.
Pretty strong, and then the adult victim becomes a caretaker, right? And has to be the rescuer and has to take care of. And again, these are not because they're insecure or, you know, people who don't are dealing with too much trauma in their life. I mean, some people are come from super healthy family systems, but they just don't want to see things not work well. They're conscientious. So, right, the Big Five personality test, you can find it on truility.com, right? That's the one where highly agreeable victims and survivors and conscientious.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
just gonna keep chugging along here, gonna keep working at it.
Exactly. I was that. That's why I was a victim, and so were you, right? Um, and I want to thank you so much for this. This has been an amazing discussion. I know so many parents are gonna just finally understand this piece of the puzzle. And can you share with everybody how they can find you? I know you got your podcast. How else can people find out more information about you?
Sure. So Coercive Control Consulting is my website, and I have associates who are trained by me who understand coercive control. I do clinician trainings, therapist trainings, attorney trainings, so that we begin to expand the knowledge of what this looks like across systems. It's 14 CEs, but also my protective parenting program, which is a program for protective parents to help them navigate how to parent children, and this could be up to 25 or so. So, but young children too old and how to parent them so that they get the support, so that these children that are coming home from this abuser's house and are reactive and behaving in a way, how do we help them? How do
Mhm.
we help alleviate their stresses so that they can actually handle that abuser's behavior? And how do we help ourselves? So, yeah.
You are doing such amazing work in the world, and I
Oh,
am so
thank
grateful that you were here. Thank you.
thank you.
I am so sorry that was such a long video, but we could have talked all day. She's a friend of mine. We're from the same state. I don't live there anymore, but we talk a lot and connect. And I begged her to do this episode because everyone wants to know, how are they controlling my child? They're so smart. It's coercive control, right? Narcissists use the tactics of coercive control to manipulate your child. And I hope you learn today, A, you're not alone, but B, that this is what's happening. And hopefully you could do some of that prep in that Christine is talking about, with making a list of your accusations and how you would respond to them when the time comes. This is Tracy Malone. I coach people on this topic as well as any other narcissistic topic from all over the world. So if you are struggling with this, you do not have to struggle alone. Get some advice. It doesn't mean you're on a therapist couch for the next 10 years. You're learning strategies for what you need and what you're facing. I can help you with that. So until next time, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again.